Good evening, everyone. I'm Fanta Aw, Vice President of Campus Life and Inclusive Excellence at American. Thank you to all of our families who are near and far. We know that some of you are joining us from around the world and from around the country. Welcome again. We hope you're all well, and we look forward to the conversation this evening. It is indeed my pleasure this evening to introduce to you our topic. We will be looking at the future of American University, and President Burwell will be making a few remarks, and we'll be joined by other colleagues at the university as well. To get us started, I know we've been really, I think all of us have been overwhelmed by just the sheer number of things that we've had to deal with over a very short period of time. And also, I know for us at the university, it's been also a time to pause and to reflect. We think that that's important. And so to get us started, I will start with sort of a brief slideshow to kind of give you a little bit of some of the milestones at the institution. And so we'll start with a very brief slideshow, and then I'll introduce briefly President Burwell, and we'll get started. Thanks to everyone for joining us this evening again. Once again, thanks to all of you. It is intentional that the title of tonight's conversation is AU Forward, Challenge Accepted. It is indeed my honor to introduce to you President Sylvia Burwell. I think she is known to all of you because you have gotten her memos, and many of you have also heard from her in the past, but it's important for me to just do a very brief introduction. President Burwell is the 15th president of American University and the first woman to lead the institution. Under her leadership, the university developed and implemented the 5-year strategic plan, Change Makers for a Changing World, because we're the first university in the United States to achieve carbon neutrality. And there are many other achievements that you've seen in the slideshow, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, including expanding our research and scholarship, as well as completing the brand new Hall of Science, something we're very proud of, and we hope that you will have an opportunity to come and visit it. She previously served as the 22nd Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and prior to that was the Director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Barack Obama. Needless to say that those two areas of strengths have served us well as an institution during this very challenging time when you're thinking about COVID-19 and you're thinking about the economic situation in the US and in the world. She has held leadership position in 2 of the largest foundations in the world. First as president of the Global Development Program, and then the first chief operating officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and as president of the Walmart Foundation. She serves on numerous boards currently, including the Council on Foreign Relations and GuideWell, and is a member of the Aspen Strategy Group and the Aspen Institute on the Future of Work initiative. She earns her bachelor from Harvard University as well as also from Oxford University, and was a Rhodes Scholars there. We've been fortunate that since she's arrived, she spent quite a bit of time with our students who've been competing for the Truman, the Rhodes, the Marshall, and spending time with them and providing some mentorship there as well. And is a proud native of Hinton, West Virginia. And she and her husband, Stephen, live, of course, here in Washington with their 2 young children. And so without further ado, President Burwell.
Thank you, Fanta, for that introduction. And as always, thank you for your leadership here at AU. Most of the families, I think, have met Dr. Aw. If any of you haven't, you're in for a treat once we're back on campus, because not only is she a triple eagle with 3 degrees from AU, but her commitment to this university never takes a day off. And her leadership in our journey towards inclusive excellence has been crucial at this moment in the history of AU and our nation. But let me begin by saying to all our families and parents who are joining us today, welcome to American University. I'm Sylvia Burwell, and I'm your president here, and I'm excited to welcome all of you to the AU family. Let me start by thanking you, our new Eagle families, for all that you're doing to support our students during these times. As a mother of 2 young kids who are in virtual learning as well, I know how much you all are taking on. And Family Week is just one way we want to show you how much we appreciate all your work. I know that when you think of a university president, you often think of someone who has been part of the university for a long time. But it really wasn't that long ago that I was actually sitting in your same seat for our first-year parents, just starting to learn about what it means to be an AU Eagle. I first became president in 2017, so I guess you can say I am kicking off my senior year this year. And everything that I've learned in these years have only made me more committed to this community and love it more. It's truly a special place with amazing people. When I joined AU, I was what people called a non-traditional leader for a university. My background wasn't in academia, and it was in leading large organizations like federal agencies and global foundations, and often leading them through times of challenge and change. And I will say that 2020 has certainly given us all a bit of both this year. To our new students, I want to say one thing. You may be wondering if you belong or what your role is, or maybe you feel just a little different, and that's okay. We've all felt that at one time or another, and the trick is to look around and reach out. Find out what interests you or what inspires you and dive in, and the worries of belonging will fade away. As for me, it turns out that my non-traditional background came in quite handy for non-traditional times. Being a former head of the Health and Human Services during a pandemic has been helpful, even though I wish that it didn't need to be. Another part of my experience that I've been thinking about a lot lately is about something, and that was learning to ski. I didn't actually learn until I was in my 20s. And one of the first things that they teach you is that when you start feeling like you're going to fall, the best thing to do is actually the opposite of what you might think. You have to lean down the hill. And it's not intuitive that you should act in a way that feels like it would make a fall worse. And that's also something I've learned here in coming to AU. We lean in just like in skiing. And this is a place that embraces challenge and change. In fact, it's our tradition to be non-traditional. When times are tough, when solutions seem out of reach, AU has the response of challenge accepted. And today, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've done over 2020 to address some of the challenges that have been presented to all of us, and how our strategy and our community have come together to put us on a strong footing. And then I want to talk a little bit about 2020 and looking to the future to see how our students and our community will come out of these times stronger. First, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge something that I know many are feeling, and we're not necessarily feeling stronger at this point. Right now, across the nation and across our AU family, we're experiencing challenging times in different ways. Maybe you or someone in your family have had health challenges related to the pandemic. Perhaps you could be facing financial challenges, or we're facing unprecedented economic times as a nation. You could be experiencing the trauma and emotional toll of racial injustice. The deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others have sparked nationwide protests against injustice and the fierce urgency of this moment. These are all calling us to act, but they're also forcing many to relive the trauma that people of color experience far too often in our nation. We're facing a devastating combination of three crises: a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a crisis of racial injustice. And I want you to know that you're not alone and your AU family is with you. I also want you to know that your university is navigating these challenges as well. I've learned that in challenging times, the best thing an organization can do is bring clarity. Clarity in communication, goals, and clarity in decisions. And when COVID-19 first hit, as a university, we set three goals and principles. First, and most fundamentally, to safeguard the health and well-being of our community. Second, to continue to advance our educational and research mission in the context that we were facing. And third, to be a force for good in contributing to the overall response in the DC region. Our principles were informed by the best data we could get and how we were going to implement that in terms of the changing circumstances. And they helped us communicate regularly with the community in the spring and summer. And when the data was clear that we could not have a residential life experience in the fall of 2020 that would meet those goals of safety and health of our community, we moved the fall 2020 semester online. I miss our students, from running into the students on the quad, on my walks to work, to seeing their smiling faces for convocation and those first days of classes. This semester has felt different, and I can't wait until we can see them all again and it's safe to return to the campus. As the old saying goes, tough times don't last, but tough people do. And we have a plan to outlast these tough times and come out on the other side stronger. In my second year, as was mentioned by Fanta, we started a strategy, and it's Change Makers for a Changing World. And to be clear, we came up with that title well before we had any idea of the changes and the challenges that 2020 would throw our way. But the elements of our strategy were well placed for the changes that we face today. Our strategy was based on three things: scholarship, learning, and community, knowing that those are the pillars of our mission here at AU. And we know that scholarship is central to AU's future. So we're drawing on places where AU's research excels and brings together the expertise across schools and disciplines and breaking new ground for the future. Scholarship isn't just about faculty. It's also about bringing together faculty and their students. There are 27 faculty members with a research lab in our new Hall of Science, which was mentioned and you saw on the slideshow. They are mentoring more than 120 students, and more than half of those are undergraduates. These faculty members have published more than 160 papers over the past 3 years, and more than a third of those list undergraduate students as co-authors. AU is a great place to engage in the scholarship, research, and practice that leaders in the field are engaging with today. Our Sign Institute of Policy and Politics, launched in 2018, brings together people and top minds in politics, policy, journalism, and they give our students a front row view of the most pressing issues and policy questions. In 2020, we welcomed President Obama's chief speechwriter. We've welcomed President Trump's deputy national security advisor and the head of politics and government from Instagram, and many, many more. Our faculty engage in applied learning, bringing theory into practice in ways that impact and illustrate what research and scholarship can do. Our faculty are focused on co-creating with students to make them an active part of the research process. Research at AU is an all hands on deck process because it's important and its implications are so important to our nation and our world. An example is in our School of Public Affairs, Professor Leyland Johnson and graduate student Taylor Shreve conducted a detailed analysis of the interaction between drug overdoses in Philadelphia and housing policies with policing. Their work could prove to get us vital answers that will help us locate overdose prevention centers and thereby save lives, both in Philadelphia and cities around the nation. The second pillar of our strategy is learning. We are an educational institution committed to the highest quality teaching, and we're being noticed for it. U.S. News & World Report just published its annual rankings of 396 national universities. And not only did American University move up one spot in the overall, this year we were ranked 43rd in the nation for the quality of our first-year student experience and 35th in the top innovative universities and 25th in undergraduate teaching. And these aren't static numbers. We're moving on and we're moving forward. And we want to enhance the student experience, expand opportunities for lifelong learning, and excel in providing a learning experience that is flexible, personalized, and accessible. We also want a learning experience that's fun. As you can imagine, AU can never let an election year pass without some creative and thoughtful engagement in our democratic process. And every Thursday right now, the students in our School of Communications Presidential Campaign 2020 class, taught by Professor Lenny Steinhorn, talk with the local news station, WUSA 9, about the latest campaign developments and the views of young voters. Professor Harding's chemistry and cooking class is another example. When the pandemic hit and students had to shift to home learning, he adapted. Rather than have students meet in his lab, they began meeting virtually in their own labs, by which I mean their kitchens in their homes. And he and the students over Zoom worked together to take the recipe of a batch of cookies and adapt it to make a single one. In the process, learning how to think critically about experimental design and how to normalize and analyze data. AU is a place where learning is more than just lectures. It's a lifelong process and one that engages you in new and surprising ways. Those first two pillars of our strategy, scholarship and learning, you'll hear pretty much at any university. But it's the third that really distinguishes American University. At AU, community means both our campus and the different communities we're part of, locally, nationally, and globally. To us, community is both a means and an end. It's how we respond to challenging times, by coming together, and it's our calling to build stronger bonds everywhere we go. I've been inspired to see what our community has done this year. Just like yesterday, when the students who lead our Kennedy Political Union welcomed Dr. Anthony Fauci to talk to the AU community about his work in public health and the fight against coronavirus. I've seen how AU reaches beyond our campus in our own community around us, like our DC Reads program, which seeks to improve literacy in the district by connecting AU students with students in the DC public schools who need a tutor. Or the DCPS Public School Teacher Pipeline, which provides scholarships and supports to graduates of DC public schools who want to remain in their hometown to teach after graduating from college. And finally, the AU community is filled with active global citizens. You can see that in the scholarship from our School of International Service, the achievements of our students in our Model UN, ranked #2 in North America. And as soon as this pandemic is over, we will begin traveling again, and you will see it in the students heading across the globe as part of AU's Study Abroad program, which is ranked #11 in the nation. Scholarship, learning, community. These are the strengths of AU. They're what we've excelled in and what we plan to build our future around. And focusing on those pieces is how we will come out of 2020 stronger. I want to pause for a moment and ask you to visualize something with me. At some point, 2020 will be over. At some point, maybe not as soon as we would have liked or preferred, the coronavirus pandemic will be over. And while we never will be the same as we were before the pandemic, we will be back to a kind of normalcy. We'll meet in person, we'll be together again. What you want to know today is simple. How do we make sure that American University and our students come out on the other side of this stronger? And we do it by staying the course on our strategy that we have in place. We're focused on increasing access and equity in the student experience. And this means ensuring that students who come to AU have the full benefit of an AU education. It means providing student support in stipends to our highest needs students who may not be able to afford unpaid internships or study abroad. We believe that to be prepared for the workforce, our students must work and learn in diverse and inclusive teams. They have to be able to solve complex problems. And as we think about that, our complex problems is one of the most important courses that we think about on our students' curricular journey. We're focusing on enhancing our impact on culture, on economy, and our society through research and teaching. And that means elevating our teaching and scholarship on subjects like health and society, data science, security, and new technologies, and furthering an anti-racist society. Finally, we focus on building better communities. That means advancing policy innovations, changing educational outcomes, and finding new ways to engage our community and lift up our neighbors. A disruptive year like this one has only accelerated the changes in higher education. Changes towards a new kind of student experience, towards new cross-disciplinary approaches to teaching and scholarship, and towards a campus that isn't apart from its community, but a part of it. AU had a little head start because these were exactly the changes that we've been preparing for. We accepted these challenges when we laid out our new strategy, and we got a few years of work across the university already. We're ready, and AU is moving forward. And I am so glad that you're joining us. Building the future of higher education has never been more important and more urgent than now. And we believe you've made the right choice. You've chosen a community that saw those changes coming and started preparing for the challenges, embracing those opportunities that were presented. And that's why American University has always been. We've always been that way. We're the home of the first law school to accept women, which was founded by 2 pioneering women. We're the home of the civil rights pioneers like Julian Bond, who taught on this campus. And we're the place where President Kennedy first called for an end to nuclear brinkmanship and the beginning of a strategy for peace. We're a place that's never shied away from challenging times. We lean in, we come out stronger because we are a community of change makers. Thank you. I want to turn to questions, and I want to make sure before we turn to questions, I think you met Dr. Fanta Aw, and on my other side is Peter Starr, who is the acting provost of the university. And we'll be answering some of your questions, and many of you have submitted questions, and we're also going to take questions during the chat. But I want to actually start with a question that I think is on everyone's mind, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it and work on that now, and that is the spring. And what are we doing in the spring? I know all of our families are anxious to know and understand what we're doing in the spring and when we're going to make that decision. Let me start with that question, which is, when are you going to decide what we're doing in the spring? And we will, by the end of this month, have made an announcement about what we're doing in the spring. As we think about the timing of those announcements, and if we can, we'll do it sooner. But one of the things that's guided us through this process of our decision making, we've tried very hard to balance having enough information that we can make the most forward-leaning decisions, that when we have to make decisions when we don't have as much information, we often have to make decisions that don't afford us the opportunity to lean forward as much. And so that's what we are doing. We're in the midst of that learning and that thinking, and as soon as we can get that decision, but we will definitely have a decision by the end of this month and hopefully before. Another question that I think is on everyone's mind is, how are you framing this question of the decision making for the spring? And I want to harken back to the decisions that we've already made, and there are some conditions that are still quite present and things that we need to consider. One of those is the issue of the caseload for the country. And the reason that's so important to us is it has to do with the effectiveness of the public health tools that we can use and put in place. And for those of you who joined us yesterday evening with Dr. Fauci and this conversation about where caseload is going, that's something we're going to be keeping our eye on, and it's very, very important because you have to get the caseload down to a point where those public health measures will work, where you know where cases are coming from, you can do the appropriate contact tracing, and you can contain. We're going to continue to have cases. I wish that weren't the case, but I think we should all be honest. The question is can you keep those cases in a contained manner? And I think we know that what we've seen is over the past weeks, we've seen a 25% increase in those cases nationwide, but we want to watch and follow and see where things are going. A second issue that I had mentioned before when we made the other decision was the issue of testing and testing capacity. As we've been watching and studying other institutions who are doing different types and approaches, one of the things that's become very clear is you need to test often. You need to have tests that have a very rapid response. 40% of the disease is now being estimated that it's passed asymptomatically. So that surveillance testing, which I've talked about before, is quite important. And you want to do it on a pretty quick cadence, and you need those results quickly. So testing. The other two things that I mentioned are also still going to be considerations. The questions of what's happening in our community in terms of our K through 12 schools, which impacts our faculty and our staff. And the other thing is it still stands in the district that anyone who comes here and comes from one of the high risk areas must quarantine for 14 days. Those are all considerations, and we're adding all the other considerations, things like what we're seeing in terms of what other universities are trying, what that means in everything from food and dining to the mental health of students. We know Zoom fatigue exists for the students that are joining us this evening and the parents. You all know it and see it in your household. We also know that there are mental health issues that are being impacted, and those are cutting both ways. We're seeing that with some of the students who are at universities who are isolated and alone when they're in quarantine for 14 days, or when they have ups and downs of we're in, we're on, I can see people, then I can't. And so, as well as the Zoom fatigue and being away from friends and colleagues and not being able to meet. So these are all considerations that we're going to take into account as we try and make that decision that maximizes. The other thing, and I'm sure you all know it because you have friends that feel differently. Different people are experiencing this in different ways. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we gather the science, the facts, we observe and learn from what others are doing. We observe and learn from what we're doing in terms of here on campus and make that decision as quickly as we can. I wish I could give you an answer this moment, but what I hope is and believe is we will give you a better answer for the time period of bringing together some more information as we think through what we're doing. With that, I want to turn to your questions. And Fanta, I think you're going to moderate for us.
Sure, thank you. No, I think you started off with what has been on everyone's mind, because certainly we've heard from several of our parents, including Brooke Morse and Ben Goodall, were among the ones who had asked the question about what is our plan, when will we have the announcement, and what will be the criteria for decision making. The next question really has to do with what I would call the value proposition of an AU education. And particularly it's around what are we doing around career readiness, exposure to faculty, et cetera. And the question is from Jeffrey Weaver from Shaker Heights, Ohio, wanting to ask about how, and about faculty and academic departments, how are they helping to account for missed internships opportunities this fall? What's the accessibility of faculty? And that's a question I think for Provost Starr as well as President Burwell.
I'll just say it is something that is for us very important. I think for all of you, you know the We Know Success part of our website. It's something that we think is actually extremely important in terms of making sure that our students, whether that's going to graduate school or employment's important. And we started this in the spring. We had over 1,000 students attend and over 300 companies attend our first virtual career fair that we did. But Peter, why don't I turn to you to speak to some of the specifics about how our faculty is engaging in this mentoring. And please, also, I will just mention one other, Peter will do the faculty, but our alumni, this is a place where our alumni are engaged right now. And this is a place where we're great that our AU community has come together because they are engaging, as that is an important step, both in terms of internships and employment in terms of our alumni. But Peter, I'll turn to you.
Let me start general and then talk to the very specific. As you don't know, I spent 24 years at a big university, R1 university out in Southern California. And including 2 years in the dean's office. When I came to American University as the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, I was immediately struck by how dedicated this faculty is to our students. I was amazed. As a dean at that institution, I was fighting off faculty who were trying not to teach. At American University, I was blessed by having faculty who really wanted to teach, who were engaged with their students, and that continues to this day. This is the hallmark of American University. When we announced the change to a more online modality over the summer, we had faculty spontaneously create videos, which they sent to your students. I hope some of your students may have gotten them. Sort of extemporaneously saying how much they look forward to having the students in their classroom. Sylvia cited the record of faculty doing research with their students. It's not just in the Hall of Science, although they do a great job. It's all around this university. It's part of the ethos of what this university does. So whether it's the faculty member who's reaching out to the student to mentor that student, whether it's the Career Center, as Sylvia mentioned, and Fanta mentioned, who are really engaged on career readiness, whether it's a set of skills institutes that you may have heard about, called the A Better You Skills Development Institutes, which start on Friday. And we're going to be talking about things like career readiness and job readiness, career building, and community awareness. Whether it's new thoughts about what the AU education is going to look like, not just now, but going forward, we have an incredibly engaged faculty, and we have a faculty that I think cares about nothing so much as the students that they're teaching.
I would just add, I had a virtual faculty breakfast this week, and it was great because the youngest member and the oldest member talked about the creativity and engagement and admitted that they had not, before COVID came, they had not taught online, and that was not something they were seeking. And now they openly admitted that they were the biggest proponent, and it was about the engagement with the students, that they find that actually they get more engagement and students are willing to come, perhaps some students who might not have come to their office hours, engage in ways. And it was just terrific to hear this faculty member who was using all kinds of new social media tools, even more than I do, in terms of making sure that they're engaging the students. And that is an important part of this career progression, because our faculty are connecting them with both their academic next steps and their career next steps.
Thank you. Thank you. And as a follow-up to this, Laura McGraw, who from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, wanted to ask the follow-up was about, finding remote research and internship opportunities that are aligned with their majors and careers for students. And if we can talk a little bit about that around the research and internships as well.
So I could start, but Fanta, you probably have some insight into this as well. So I encourage you to follow. Research opportunities really start when you get to know a faculty member. One of the things that I always used to say as a dean, and now will say as an acting provost, is the single best thing that one can do as a first-year student is take classes from people who have interests that might align well with yours. Because it's really that one-to-one personal experience of working with somebody, going to their office hours, whether they're virtual or face-to-face, and engaging with the faculty member and asking the faculty member about their research. That's the beginning of a journey that it can be lifelong, creation of a mentorship opportunity that will last for someone's entire career. So research really works that way. It works by figuring out what you want to do, being aggressive, not being forward thinking in approaching faculty and getting to know your faculty, and then making those connections. Internships is a wonderful, we've talked about the extent to which our career center is very highly ranked within the university world. The Career Center does a lot of the internships. And it's not just the Career Center, you've also got COGOT has a Career Center, the COGOT School of Business is a Career Center, SIS helps to a degree with internships. So internships are, the first stop is the Career Center. But after that, it's also faculty, because you have faculty at Sylvia's old haunt up at NIH. We have students who go up and work at NIH because they've worked with faculty, they've expressed interest in working up at the National Institutes of Health with faculty, and faculty have made connections for them. So it's the Career Center, the various career centers in the various schools, but it's also faculty too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. And I would say added to that is also we find that it's incredibly important, going back to the conversation about community, some of the volunteer work that also helps build, I think, some of the career readiness path. And there are multiple avenues for doing so. And there's also resources that are available for how to do that remotely. And we would encourage some of our students to think about that as well. The question that's come up, I think we've all heard this numerous times: sense of isolation, feeling disconnected because near and far, and also, frankly, the fact that we're all living in cities and places where the level of interaction for all the reasons around health and safety have had to be curtailed for many reasons. And so this is from Alina Aby of San Francisco, California. How can regional AU communities be created for students so that they can feel integrated with studying and online, and also just frankly building community? That's one of the questions that have come up. And I know Peter, particularly in talking with the faculty, they've been looking at how to have students in small groups, how to really try to create sort of learning communities within their classes, and trying to be as intentional about that. I didn't know if there were some other things you wanted to add, and then we can talk a little bit on the co-curricular side, some of the things that we're trying to do as well.
No, I think you should do the co-curricular.
Let's do our Eagles Everywhere, but the breakout groups and trying to create places for conversation. I think there's also the direct engagement of the faculty that they're trying to do that, and to create the spaces in some of the classes. Some of the faculty are also using tools about spaces where starting the class with more personal things in terms of giving that opportunity, taking a few moments at the beginning of class to engage in personal ways with the students, so that there's an opportunity for them to say something or answer a question that creates a little bit more. So there are tools, those kinds of tools, breakout sessions in terms of some of the tools that are in a curricular setting. But this idea of the regional stuff, do you want to describe Eagles Everywhere?
Sure. No. So we definitely. So for our families, and I don't know, Karen, if you have the site up, but we just launched AU Together, Eagles Everywhere, and this is really trying to create a space for our students in different parts of the country to come together using a platform. And also, we're having what we call sort of our AU ambassadors who are helping to kind of facilitate that. And it's really connecting with students. It's also helping students connect with alumni. As we've said before, there's real tremendous value in students connecting with alumni to find out a little bit more about career options, areas of passion. And then there's also connecting with families as well. I know for our families, the Facebook version for families about how to connect, and we're seeing, some good movements there in terms of families. Just as an anecdote, for example, we know that our alumni working with students in New York have started really a vibrant group in New York, where they've been going to Central Park to walk and to be able to connect in physically distanced ways with all of the precautionary measures to kind of help people move a bit more and kind of create connections. And so what we're really doing is we're encouraging our students to find ways that works for them, not one size fits all. And so we will continue to push for that, and we'll continue to facilitate different ways for students to get together. We've certainly heard from you all as families, particularly the questions from parents, what do I do with my student who's an introvert and who, may be a bit more shy? Are there things that you can do? Are there things that you can help with? And we are looking at other ways to really bring sort of more of our introverts together and to let them know that they're not the only one. But the other thing that I wanted to also remind our parents, particularly our first-year students, because we know this in student development world, and that is that the first 6 weeks of the semester is what we call the red zone. And that is students go through a range of emotions, highs and lows. There are really days of sadness, days of really, in many ways, contemplation and a lot of things that are going on. These are also normal phases of what students go through developmentally as they transition from high school to college. And so we are really encouraging our families, continue to reach out for our students, know that there will be this ebb and flow, but really more importantly, it's important to start somewhere And there are myriads of ways, whether it's through clubs and organizations, whether it's through volunteer work, whether it's through that engagement with your faculty member, and or through Eagles Everywhere. We know that there will be numerous ways that you will want to connect, and we encourage you to do so. And similarly for our families, we know that you've started. We have over close to 500 now in the different sort of regions that have started to connect. And so we encourage you to do that as well, and to share your experiences and share your knowledge with each other. But those are some of the things that we're looking at in terms of connection for our students. So to say, yes, we hear you, more to come. In addition, we will be launching very soon a platform and a tool, and it's called You at American University. And this is really through a collaboration with an organization that's been doing this. And it's a personalized private student well-being portal that will be launched, and with there really lots of resources around from behavioral health experts. And it's to help with academic success, it's to promote well-being, and helping students really in many ways navigate some of the challenges ahead. And students will be able to access this from their phone, from a computer, and it's personalized to address their own concerns and goals. They'll be able to put in some information, and based on that, it will help kind of be almost a navigator in a way. And so that is forthcoming, and we'll make sure to get that out to students. We're right now literally getting it up and running and testing the platform. But I wanted to let you all know that that is forthcoming as we're looking at health and well-being of our students. So please stay tuned for that, and we'll be announcing that to students, and we'll be working with them on that. So that's one of the questions that came up. Then there's the question from Julio Garcia from Colombia. What lasting strategies could be implemented to promote the strengthening of fundamental human values that allow greater respect and better consistency coexistence among the citizens of the world? This is this piece again about community in a big C word. So perhaps if we can have an answer for our colleague here.
So I think that our work is a core element of our strategy. I think many know inclusive excellence is a part of our strategy, and certainly in terms of the three crises that I spoke about, our inclusive excellence was already embedded in a part of our strategy. Certainly, we're focusing very specifically on certain race issues, and that is one place where I think what you're talking about, where it occurs at the university. I think it's also important to reflect that we actually focus on curricular approaches to helping our students learn to do what you're talking about, which is how do you do civil discourse? How do you take facts and have conversations that are not yelling or behaving in ways, but working through and really listening. And so our AUX 1 and 2 curriculum, American University 1 and 2, this is a curriculum for our first year students, which is about thinking about how do you integrate into a university community and learn some of those tools that you need that aren't just important for a university community. They're important for being good citizens when you leave here and for your professional life. The other thing is actually we do work in this space curricularly in terms of scholarship and research. And we do work in terms of civic engagement, civil discourse, and how that works and how that happens. And we have several professors who this is their area of expertise. We've been funded from a wide range of groups in terms of this issue, from folks like the Koch Foundation to the other side in terms of, because it is something where what we are trying to do is create respectful dialogue, civic discourse, respect for points of view. And the other thing that many of your students may tell you, those who are certainly upperclassmen will, that one of the questions we encourage our students to participate. We were just announced again as the nation's most politically active university. But the one thing we ask is do your homework, get your facts. And that is an expectation that we try and create with the students, both curricularly and co-curricularly, in terms of some of the work that we're doing. Fanta or Peter, I don't know if either of you want to.
I'll jump in here. 4 years ago, we created and launched a new general education program. This is something that universities do every 25 years. It takes a lot of work. And we are extraordinarily proud of this program. I think it's one of the reasons why undergraduate teaching has become number 25 in the nation. The program is very different from most most general education programs in the sense that it's not, you don't take distribution of a certain number of buckets, do this, 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 and this. It's based on the notion of a habit of mind. We want our students to graduate from American University having fundamental habits of mind like ethical reasoning, like sociocultural understanding. And it starts with a course called Complex Problems, which is probably, I think, the signature course at American University, because it takes students and examines a specific social, cultural, or intellectual problem from a multiplicity of perspectives that gives them a sense that you could see the world in different ways. And there's validity in seeing worlds in different ways. It's a very much counter to a lot of what's going on in our culture today, but it's desperately important because it creates a sense of complexity, context, nuance that becomes the foundation for that understanding, that belief in, and that practice of civic engagement, of civil discourse, and being a strong citizen of the world who's able to see the world in complex, interesting, and fundamentally real ways.
Fanta, did you want to add?
No, I mean, I think, the other piece about this is the interdisciplinary nature, right? I think, for, Julio Garcia from Colombia, we also, it's important, and President Burwell mentioned our study abroad and our education abroad. We understand that the issues that are going on in the US have relationship to other parts of the world and vice versa. And so it's really also helping our students understand the kind of interdependencies that exist and how they need to really be able to understand it from a nuanced perspective, and frankly, the cross-cultural and intercultural competence that they need in order to kind of navigate the world that we're living in. And that's an important part of the curriculum. And as Peter mentioned, it's been designed intentionally with that in mind. It's important for our students to really understand, if you're going to solve some of the critical issues of our time, the sociologists can't solve it alone. They have to be able to work with the scientists. They need to be able to work with the geographer. They need to be able to work with others, and vice versa. And so that is something that I think the curriculum has provided that breadth for our students to be able to do that. And students are in one school and take classes in another, but they can major and minor. They can double major, and having that flexibility also really helps them, I think, to really, in many ways, harness those nuanced and important ways of solving complex and nuanced problems that we have. So that's one of the ways that I think that the curriculum really does afford that breadth, along with the experiential, to kind of help them, give them a hands-on approach to this.
Last night, as I was speaking with several of our students and asking what their favorite course was, what Fanta just described was one of our students, a course at our School of International Service, which captures what Fanta was talking about, was the favorite course of one of our students that I was asking, what's your best class this semester?
So this is one of the things. There's one question, and it has to go again. It's the question about planning for the spring and the district government, and kind of trying to understand the role of the district government in this. And how is that going to be playing out as we're thinking about the spring? So that's one thing. That's because, and again, the question specifically talks about the fact that COVID-19 will still be circulating and will be still with us here in the spring.
That's correct. And I think the collaboration with local governments is an important one as we work through that. And we've done that throughout our entire process. And as a matter of fact, we, consider ourselves proactive partners with the district in this space. There are decisions by the district, like the 14-day quarantine, that do impact us, and so we are staying close with the district. Fanta actually spends quite a bit of time as part of some of the working groups that are with the district, and I do as well, and will be continuing to engage with the mayor on these issues in terms of making sure that there are several parts to this. And one is, there are certain functions that are quite important to us. Contact tracing is something that is generally done by your public health officials, your local public health officials. And the speed with which that gets done is going to be extremely important, because when you think about spread, the fact that there's asymptomatic transmission that's occurring so much and can occur so quickly, is you've got to get that test result quickly, and then you've got to do the contact tracing quickly. And so making sure that those fundamentals are in place are some of the important things and important conversations that we're having right now with the district as we work through how we think about. What I would describe us is we're in the process of a ramp. We want to ramp back to what we were, where we were before. And as we think about that ramp and the different elements of that ramp, we think about the classroom, you know, where and how can we ramp in the classroom settings? We think about residency. We're a residential institution. I think you know we have a limited number of students on the campus at this time, very limited, but how can we ramp in the resident space? And then there's how can we ramp co-curricularly? And that's something that we're hearing a lot about, and some of the questions I think are reflecting it, which thank you all for participating and giving us your questions, because it helps us know and understand what you're experiencing. We're trying to reach out as much as possible, but these questions are an important part of that. We know that co-curricular things, and that's everything from could they come to the campus to study or be in a safe environment with another student in terms of social engagement? Could they come to the campus and perhaps even see one of their professors for office hours in a safe approach? And so those are the three areas that we're thinking about that ramp. The district is an important part because we are part of a community. There are things that the district, you know, we have talked to the mayor about the importance of, bars and, issues like that. We just have to be honest. When there aren't opportunities like that, and I know none of your all students participate in anything like that, those who are on this, but we do have to plan, and we know, trying to figure out how we can do things, because we know these are young people, and one of the things is college does need to be fun, and we're in a particular time, but we're trying to think about those things on the ramp as well.
Thank you. Then there's the question about study abroad. Are there any updates on possible study abroad for the spring semester? And in this case, the specific question is, we have a junior in SIS who would otherwise finish next fall due to AP credits and all of that, and also has to do some research. So realistically, what does the spring look like as we're thinking about study abroad in terms of options?
So we're about a week away from, 2 weeks away from sort of get an announcement to the community. We're likely to do it. We have programs start at different times. So a program that would start in January is much riskier than a program that's going to start in March. And so what we're likely to do, we had a meeting today that Fanta was part of. We're likely to be staging the announcements about what study abroad opportunities may be available. Obviously, it's dependent upon the CDC. It's dependent to some degree on the State Department. It depends on the ease with which students can travel to, and also the ease with which students can travel back. We are very concerned and aware that many of our students need study abroad to continue. What I will say is that a very high percentage of our students who are going to study abroad are actually taking courses with their study abroad centers, particularly our centers in Madrid, Brussels, and Nairobi. And they're taking courses as if they were in Nairobi or as if they were in Madrid from the study abroad centers mixed with their AU courses. So we are very conscious of this. We are going to make an announcement, probably in this staged way, one announcement maybe around the early November timeframe, and another announcement maybe around the early December timeframe for the courses and courses of study that start much later in the spring.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. The other piece, the other thing is, and this is, I think, for you, President Burwell, is, in what ways do you think COVID-19 will change the face of higher education?
So I think many of you all know, I believed, and part of why I came to higher education is I believed it was a time of change, and an important time of change with regard to really three issues: access, affordability, and how we measure quality. and how we think about that in terms of the student and the learner. And so I think that what COVID-19 will do is it will accelerate us on a path to thinking about things and thinking about things in broader, in different ways. I think when you heard me mention this concept of the student experience and how we're thinking about how this accelerates everything from, so how do we think about that timetable? You know, the academic calendar is based on an agrarian world. That's why it was based the way it is. And what that means in terms of, are there changes to that? We no longer need to stick to that. What are the things that our students need? Can you think about students completing in a different cycle, using experiential learning at different points in time versus classroom learning? And I think the changes that we're going to see are going to be accelerating. And the other thing that I think is a change, so I think what the traditional four-year college experience is going to evolve. It's still going to be, you know, many people, the residential experience that you have is going to be an important thing, and I think we're learning the importance of that. But I think it's going to be enhanced by other things. When do you use digital as a tool? When and how do you think about the timetables and that sort of thing? I think the other thing that's going to happen, and that speaks, when you said higher education, that speaks to what will always be, which is the idea of what is a college degree. But I think that that's going to be enhanced and supplemented, not replaced, by the idea of learning in what I like to call an Amazon fashion. Where you want it, when you want it, how you want it. And that learning is going to be a lifelong trajectory. And the question for an institution like us is, how does AU make sure that we're delivering the top quality of what would be considered a traditional approach with new approaches to how students learn, think about it, thinking about the economics in different ways and affordability as much as we can. And at the same time, enhance that with other opportunities for people that may be at different places and different times in terms of what they want and what they need. When you think about that, that's how you will increase access. That is how you can help increase affordability. So I think that what COVID will do is accelerate change in higher ed.
Provost Starr, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I entirely agree. I have felt that a new energy in the faculty to start thinking about ways we can do things better in ways that are more responsive to our students, more responsive to the workplace, more responsive to the needs of our nation. This has been the best, quote Charles Dickens, it's been the best of times and the worst of times. It's been the worst of times for all the reasons we know. In higher education, in a very strange way and surprising way, but I've heard many people say this, it is a very interesting time because there's a lot of things that we can do now that would have been hard to do 6-8 months from now. And we're seeing a lot of change. It's changed for the better. It's changed to be responsive. The ship of an educational institution can be very slow to move, but COVID has moved it for us. And we have an opportunity that we're seizing. One of the things I deeply appreciate about President Burwell's leadership and Fanta, your leadership as well, is that sort of we can do attitude, that attitude that AU's future is for us to create. And let me say this, because it's really important, I think, for parents. I was lucky enough to be associated my first part of my career with an institution whose reputation has grown massively, not because I was there for 24 years, but simply because we did the right things. And one of the reasons why I came to American University and feel that American University is my home, far more than that institution ever was a combination of two things. The fact that we care as a community about our students, about ourselves, about one another, faculty of staff, staff to students, students to faculty, absolutely critical to who we are. Sylvia mentioned this earlier. The second thing is this ability to be nimble, this ability to be entrepreneurial, to think outside the box, and to be, for you to use a word that we sometimes use around AU, to be scrappy, to really try to change things for our students and for our community. That's the ethos of this university. It's something that I have just reveled in my 11 years here. I'm sure President Burwell has reveled in it. for her short time here, 4 years here. And Fanta, you're a triple eagle, so you know it inside out.
Thank you. We could not, finish this conversation without what is very much a DC thing. Elections. Elections are coming up. Surprise, surprise. And the question, of course, from some of our family members is, what are the opportunities for students to get engaged with elections wherever they are? So perhaps.
So I announced this week that we would make a change for the university this year and for all years going forward, that in the years of a presidential election, that will be a day where our students, our staff, and our faculty will be off in order that we can participate as a community. Our community has the freedom and ability to participate in what is a very important part of our democracy. So I would start with your students will not be having class on that day, and hopefully that will free them to do any opportunities that they want to, of course voting, and they may have done that in other ways, but in addition to that, any other things that they want to do to contribute and participate. And as a university, we've been very focused, we're in DC, and so this is important. I mentioned in my remarks Lenny Steinhorn's class in terms of the fact that we actually have students that are a part of conversations that are being used about how young people are thinking about and engaging in this process. Before COVID, we were very fortunate that Betsy Fisher Martin had arranged, in our School of Public Affairs, one of our faculty had taken our students to 2 different primaries. This was before COVID, so we were able to have the students travel and go and be a part of that. Right now at our Sign Institute of Policy and Politics, we have a series of events that are very focused around the election with people who have run campaigns on both sides of the aisle, and pollsters and others who are having conversations about this. So there are a myriad of things that we are doing, and of course encouraging our students to be a part of that process, especially with regard to the issue of voting, but also our students came forward about taking the day off because a number of our students are hoping to work in polling places because they feel as younger people that is a responsibility and risk that they can take. And so we're trying to support that by having the day off as well. And I don't know if Peter or Fanta, you want to add to that list.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, I'm mindful of time. First and foremost, again, to all of our families, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for the feedback that you've been providing. And we really, really appreciate that. And so please don't hesitate to keep writing to us at parent@american.edu. And I don't know if President Burwell and Provost Starr, if there's anything you would like to say as we close this evening.
Peter, did you want to add anything?
Go ahead, Sylvia, it's all yours.
I just want to repeat the thanks and thank you for your trust. I think that our students who have chosen to come here that are with us this evening, but especially our parents, your trust and your faith in us is something that we value tremendously and that we do not take for granted, and that we know that we need to continue to earn. And we do that by our deep focus on your students, your sons, your daughters, in terms of delivering on the high quality approach both in the classroom and out of the classroom, so that as your students progress through their time here, that they come out in terms of their role as citizens and their roles as in the workforce. We're very deeply focused, but really I just want to close with a deep appreciation as, a mother of 2, and I'm right now, our son's in the 5th grade, so we're in the applying to school stage. Again, we did that 2 years ago. It's different, and I know it just gets more as we build, but as a parent who's going through this with our own children, I just know what it's like in terms of how you're thinking about all the things that this is doing around your children. So that trust and faith in us and that support comes in so many forms, including your questions, which I hope you get the sense that we do welcome. We do appreciate it.
Thank you to all of our families near and far. We wish you well. Be safe, and thanks again for spending some time with us. Have a wonderful evening all.
Bye-bye.